Hello, hello. It is Jen Todd here sharing this little video in my love series. So for those of you that have not seen one of these before, I am Jen Todd. I am a leadership coach and consultant. And the reason I'm talking about love, and I'm here with my friend Gina Lavery, I'm going to introduce her in a moment. And I'd just like to say we did not plan our outfits, but isn't it nice we're both wearing blue? The reason I'm doing this series on love and this video is about how to bring the feeling of love into the workplace. And the reason that I got this inspiration about it is I recently wrote a children's book about my mother. It's called For the Love of Jude, which is all about unconditional love. And I thought to myself, how does this connect with the work I do? And there is this very, very deep connection in working with organizations, leaders, and team that actually is about the heart. And it's actually about that feeling of loving your work, loving the people you work with, and actually like bringing your full head and heart. So I have Gina here. Gina and I have worked together for many, many years. We met back at Pepperdine when we got our master's degrees together. And Gina is also a consultant and a coach. And we work together on a number of really significant projects. We're going to talk a little bit about it. But Gina, thank you for being here in this conversation with me.
It's a pleasure to talk about love at work.
Love. So people get all freaked out with the word love at work, right? So we don't go out saying we're love consultants. Let me kind of reframe when we say love at work, what we're talking about. So a lot of the work that we do like large scale organizational change work. We also work with teams, a lot of leadership teams, employee groups. And what we know is like a critical success factor in people creating change, achieving visions and missions is how people work together. And it's actually, people are all the time, this is how they go to work, their heads. Well, they have bodies, but they bring their minds, right? And we need our minds, but we aren't bringing our full heart. We aren't bringing often empathy and compassion. And by the way, these are all the qualities that I write about in this book about my mother. We kind of cut that off because we get all in our heads about things, right? So when Gina and I worked on these, really large scale projects, one of the things we'd always say is you have to bring, your heart and your head and your body and your full self, right? Like when people get unleashed in their full selves is really when change can happen. And trying to change big cultures and or small knit groups, this is all part of it. So Gina, what do you want to add to what I'm saying about this?
I think what you're saying is change. I think what you're saying is right, is that most people are in their heads all day at work, right? Which is, by the way, part of why people are exhausted. But I do think that this whole conversation of love at work has been changing over the last decade. And I think what people are realizing is they can't really cut their heart. They can't really not bring their heart to work because actually it's part of their body. Like there used to be a time, I think, where people thought they could check their heart at the door and just be in their minds. But we're seeing that you can't be that way anymore. You won't sustain a project. You won't build trust in your employees. Not showing your heart, your passion is really depriving people in the workplace of knowing the full you. So I think that what you're saying is really right on. Is one of the things that we do is we help leaders, and maybe they work for really smart people, and so they don't feel it's safe to bring their heart. But we help leaders, no matter what their situation, bring the heart into the open. And of course, we don't call ourselves love coaches, but we have a lot of processes that we use, right? Where people have dialogues and they listen to each other and they appreciate and value each other. That's all part of love. Like they may never call it love, but that's really about bringing love to the workplace, right? Is all those values that we bring into our work.
Yeah. And to say something more about that too, I think oftentimes, particularly at the senior levels of leadership, they want to call that like the soft stuff, right? Like, it's nice if you have that, we don't need it. But the most successful leaders I have ever worked with are those that are connected to their heart. They are emotionally intelligent. That's one of the
They're
words.
integrated.
That's one of our consulting words. Emotionally intelligent. They are connected to their employees. They collaborate well. They include people. And like what you said, they respect people. They listen to people. I mean, isn't it so much better to work for somebody that actually values and cares about what you have to say than somebody who just comes in with their head and they're super duper smart, but it's really difficult to work with them. You go home and what you're exhausted, you're pissed off, right? You feel like you're not like valued or appreciated. And this happens over and over again. And you know what? The number one reason why people leave jobs, you know it.
I do.
You're like,
I have, because I've done it.
They leave jobs because of the people they work with, usually their boss.
Yeah, so let me amplify something you said, because there's a long string of ways that people could do this, but I think one of the easiest ways to show love at work, without of course calling it that, because we're not going to call it that because people will run away screaming, but is actually to listen fully to one another. And when I am a leader that comes to me and they're not connecting to one of their employees, or they're having difficulty with a person, I said, when's the last time that you brought in your whole self to a meeting and just really found out what was on their minds? What are they concerned about? What are they struggling with? What do they care about? Without interruption and without having an agenda. And they're like, most of the time it's like, wow, because we forget that listening is a gift. And I can see when I'm doing this with my friends, with even my family members, even with your kids. Like I've had, after, you've seen this too, probably, where you've worked with somebody as a coach and then they go home and they listen to their kids in a way they've never listened, because they realize that they haven't been doing it. And it's not hard. It just takes really noticing that you're not doing it and then leaning in and listening. So listening is a really powerful way to really appreciate and value your employees and make them feel heard, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And that they'll feel loved. Yeah.
Right. Yes, I love that. So let's give them one more thing that they can do, because the one is the listening and being fully present, right? And by the way, listening means you're actually looking at them and not your phone. I mean, I coach a lot of people about turning their phones over in their computer,
or putting it in their purse, or putting it, don't put it on their desk, right?
Like really, like looking, like my daughter will be like, "Mommy, you're not looking at me," right? Like, you know, when you're like, so
he's right.
So truly listening, being present with that person. So that's one really practical way that you can bring it in. So what's another way?
Well, I like what you just said. So let's do 3 tips. The second way is to make sure the phone is never on the desk or is in your purse or is out of the way, because the intimidation that you might, the idea that you might pick that up is very anxiety provoking for the other person. So that's number 2. So the third thing is, you and I participated in this, is, so we kind of, you know, if you think back to 3rd grade, that's the grade I'm going to use. On Valentine's Day, you all had a little bag at your desk and people would come and drop Valentines. So you and I created this process during one of our interventions where they even created cards that said "in appreciation of." So everybody wrote a card for each member of the team, and then they exchanged these cards of appreciation, and people were crying at that during that exercise. So I think one last tip is, think of 3 people right now. They should just pop right into your head that you could just acknowledge. If you could write them a handwritten note, that's ideal. If you don't have their address, send them an email. And then I would say the third, not as potent way, but just pick up the phone and say, and don't start out with thank you. Start out with, I appreciate you for X, or I value this about you. It's not just thank you, I love working with you. That's not specific enough. It's like, get specific. What's the thing that they do that you really value? And people will really they'll probably hold on to it.
Well,
for the rest of their career.
You know what's so funny about this? My mother is clapping up in heaven, because one of the things she was very well known for was sending cards to people, handwritten cards. All the time. People save these cards because, you so rarely get that. And I did this recently with another, like a a healthcare firm that I was working with. And I had all these like team building activities. And guess what they said at the end of the day? We spent a whole day on all this deep stuff, trust building and sharing and dialogue and, you know, creating a new vision.
Yeah.
Almost all the people said the most impactful thing of the day was I just gave them an index card and I said, by the end of the day, write an appreciation note to each person. They were so excited about this. I had to cut them off in the middle of the meeting, like stop writing the notes because, you know, you got to be paying attention. But that was the most powerful part of the meeting. And it literally takes 3 minutes, right? Or 2 minutes.
No, it'll take you like 5 minutes to do these 3 appreciations, and it will be the world to somebody else. So absolutely.
And I think the thing you said too is important is not just, hey, I appreciate you, you do good work, but to be very specific. Like when somebody like mentions how you work and, you know, about how you are, like your being, your presence, like, you know, like it's a joy to work with you because, you know, X, Y, and Z, or, you know, these are the things that I appreciate. So there is a very practical way that you can immediately start getting that feeling at work.
We can do it spontaneously with each other if we have time.
We could, not on this call, but we will do it after. But I do appreciate, Gina, you being on this little, you know, love at work conversation. Yes. We are busting the paradigm that you can't talk about having, you know, loving feelings at work. So, so in closing, Gina, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they reach you?
Best place, LinkedIn, Gina Lavery, MSOD at LinkedIn.com, or, you know, LinkedIn. I do have a website, but I think LinkedIn is the best place to get a hold of me.
Awesome.
Or Forbes. Great. I've written a couple articles for Forbes. You could Google me for Forbes.
Yes, I love your Forbes articles. Yeah, and for me, LinkedIn is Jen Todd with one N. My website is jentodd.com, and on that website, you can link to, you know, my different work I do, but also if you have a little one, you know, I was
going to say that you,
And then I've also written another book called Daily Nuggets of Truth, Wisdom for Centering Your Soul in Unsettling Times. And that's really to help you get centered when you start each day. So would love to hear more from you all. Happy February of love. Thank you for being here, Gina.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
All right. Love you. Bye.
Bye.